my gosh. Well, this is so exciting because it's our first live mastermind on YouTube. I was just telling Damon this. He's like, what? And Damon, you get to be the lucky guinea pig for this. How are you feeling about
Hey,
that?
let's do it. You know what? Trial by fire. Like, I
Right.
got nothing to lose. I believe in myself. I believe in you.
Awesome. Let's do this thing. Okay, so Mike's here, James here. Good morning, Mike. James, yes, looking forward to this. All right, so we have people on here. Please keep commenting. Ask all your questions. So I will, Damon, I know that you will fire hose people as you
Mhm.
usually do. So sometimes I'll be like, you know what, Damon, take a break. And here's a question that was asked.
Yeah.
Is that cool?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I like, I think it's a great combination of that approach because I like the forward momentum, but
Yeah.
I also don't want to get ahead of opportunities to answer questions while we're in that topic. So that's great.
Amazing. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to hand over to you. And I know you don't do this very often, but I would love for you to again brag on yourself because you're probably one of the most humble people that I know. But if you wouldn't mind, maybe starting with that, and then let's get into today's topic.
Sure. Yeah. No, I appreciate it. So, Damon Burton founded an SEO agency, search engine optimization company, SEO National 17 years ago. Just stayed in my lane. Worked with really cool companies. Worked with professional sports teams, NBA teams, professional soccer teams. But then, what I think is even cooler is on the other side of that is worked with mom and pops and built them up to $1 million companies and amazing retention. We've had some of our year one clients with us 17 years later. Also got married 17 years ago. So been married and a business owner for 17 years, 3 kids. And I think my greatest accomplishment is freedom of time. And so hopefully some of what we go through today will bring you success as well. So you can figure out your freedom of time and what matters most to you.
It's so important. Okay, I'd love to know anyone who's watching this. We are going to be talking about schema, which I know I've like given, the thing away. But what questions immediately come to mind, or maybe what sentiment comes to mind for people who are watching this when we say schema or even SEO? Because I know for me, for the longest time, it was one of the most overwhelming things that I was like, I know we have to do this, but it seems so technical and really difficult. So I would love to hear from everyone else. What comes to mind when you hear schema or SEO?
I have a crystal ball and I know what half of it. Well, you actually just answered what half of them are going to be like, overwhelm and complication.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested to see as well, but we're going to simplify a lot of it.
Yes, love it. Okay, cool. All right. So let's get into it. Damon, I'm going to hand over to you.
Okay, cool. So let's see. Let's do the share on this and get this going here.
Ooh, while you're doing that, there, Mike is asking a very pertinent question. Where does it get placed on the web page? Which I think you're
I will cover that.
great,
Yeah.
already ahead of
Yeah.
it.
So today we're going to talk about Google domination, how to monopolize search engines, right? Because we always want to show up on the top, but there's a way that you can take up more real estate. And so, kind of to Deidre's point about SEO being complicated, right? While it is true, there are a lot of things you can simplify those. And so, what led to today's presentation is a previous presentation. And so, in a previous presentation, we talked about the core structure of SEO, the fundamentals. And so I'm not going to go really deep in the fundamentals today. Deidre has replays on those. You can follow her and reach out for more about that. But I will kind of abbreviate what those are. I'll give you kind of cliff notes. So the cliff notes of how you simplify search engine optimization, right? The goal is to show up higher on search engines for words you can monetize without paying for ads. Can you still see me while I'm sharing my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So when we talk about simplifying SEO, there's the 3 core fundamentals. The first one is your website structure. So it's really basic things like how quickly does your website load? Is it mobile friendly? And then the second thing is content. You clearly communicate your value propositions and why you're better than the competition. And then the third thing is external credibility. So do other people talk about your brand and link to your website? So as we went through those things, what we're going to cover today, what we're going to niche down is kind of a hybrid of those first 2 categories, which is structure and content. And so we're going to talk about what types of content you need to feed Google. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit for this, right? This is what I talk about when I'm referring to domination. So not only do we have just a result, but we have the entire above the fold result. And so you can do this for different things. I'm going to talk about how you do this for your personal brand. Like in this example, I'm going to talk about how you do this for your business. So maybe you don't want to be a forward facing entity, right, as a personal brand, and you want to keep it just on the business side. There's ways to do that. I'm going to cover different ways how to show up higher on search results for FAQs. Maybe you're a knowledge base, question and answer, like an editorial website. I'm going to talk about how you increase your reviews. So there's all these different ways that you show up higher on Google in these glorified results. And so that comes down to a tactic called schema. Now, what schema is it's a certain type of, the way that I simplify it is it's a love language, right? And so we want to keep things simple. So as we simplify search engine optimization in 3 categories, schema is probably one of the most technical subsets of that, but I'm going to present it in a really simple way as well. And so what I've focused on is these different types of schema. So what I mean by love language is when Google goes to your website, it makes educated guesses and it says, I think that this is this person or this business, and I think they might sell this product that might have this name and might have this price, or maybe they offer this service, but I'm really not sure. And so that indecisiveness or lack of confidence is why Google positions other websites higher. It's basically a level of confidence, because if you think about another simple way to look at search engine optimization is who makes Google look good. And so Google's less likely to show your website at the top if if there's a potential that the person that it sends to your website gets confused or it doesn't solve their problem. So if you can speak Google's love language and communicate with more clarity what your product is, who you are, what your business is, what your service is, then Google's going to go, oh, I trust that person because they're telling me clearly. So now I don't have to guess. So since I don't have to guess, I have a higher level of confidence. And if I have a higher level of confidence, it's probably a better result for the customer, which will probably come back. And then that way I get more ad revenue from that traffic. So this is what we're going to focus on today, is these 2 core types of ways to show up higher. So we're going to start with person schema. And that's the example that I gave where it can be you as an individual person. Now, we're going to start with a shortcut. If you're lucky and if you have some historical content or you have some presence online already, you can follow this. So Dennis Yu is a marketer that him and I have become friends over the years, and he wrote a great article about this. It's a really long URL. So I'm going to show you the screenshots on the next slides of like the short steps of what his URL is. You're also welcome to take a screenshot of this and then type in the URL later. Now, basically what Dennis Yu talks about is unlocking the power of knowledge panel. And so that's what this is called. When you have this big chunk of real estate, it's called knowledge panel. And what he offers is this shortcut is if you have some content already, right? Because you can only show up on Google for what Google can read. So you have to have something out there about you or your business. If you're lucky and you search your company or your personal brand, you might have this already that says claim the knowledge panel. If so, you are going to be able to skip ahead of a bunch of stuff. But then even if you claim that, you want to keep it, because once you claim this result, it can go away. And so even if you're lucky and get the shortcut, you still want to go through the rest of today's presentation because it helps solidify so you retain that. All right, so the cliff notes on Dennis's shortcut is search your name, search your brand, whatever it is that you want to monopolize Google for. It has to be some sort of entity. And then if this shows up, claim this knowledge panel, then what you're going to do is, oh, I skipped ahead. So what it's going to do is it's going to walk you through verifying it. So it'll ask you to verify ID, you have to show a government ID, you have to take a selfie with your ID, and then it's going to have you fill in the blanks. It's pretty straightforward if you have that. Okay, now if you don't have that, which is going to be the majority of us, I want to walk you through how to claim that. So the first thing is, like I said, you have to have some sort of content. So Russell Brunson is a client of mine. This article right here that I highlighted is a piece of content that we pushed out. So I'm going to give you an example of really strong types of content that you can push out. Now, this piece is featured through a press release distribution website. Now, some of you that have done SEO in the past or are familiar with SEO might be familiar with the concept of press releases, but a lot of people have an outdated perspective on press releases. The goal is no longer to just submit news because you want to get a link in here, right? And so a lot of people used to submit countless spammy press releases to any press release outlet possible just to get a link. And we talked about at the very beginning, just briefly, the 3 core fundamentals of SEO. And one of those is external credibility. And part of external credibility is, do other websites link to you? So that's not why we're doing press releases. Why we are doing press releases is because to show up in Google News, there's certain quality control guidelines you have to follow. And so if you follow those guidelines, you get in. And then because your competition and other people that spam Google does not follow those guidelines, then it goes, well, these other people that did follow those guidelines are more credible. And because they're more credible, we trust them more. And then we talked about that trust factor to get your website to show up higher. So there are certain outlets that you can use to publish that will get you featured in Google News, which is the first benefit. You get straight into Google News and can potentially just show up in a result just for the news piece right away. But then what happens is if you're consistent with the news, so like with my clients, we send out a piece of content to Google News once a month. Because if you show up in Google News and not everybody else does, but then you also do it consistently, well, then you're definitely more credible than your competition. So here's a referral link to a website that we use that got this feature. I put up the pricing here because I want to explain the differences between these. There are countless press release websites out there. Quality control measure number 1 is never use a free press release website, because we talked about the credibility. The problem with free press release websites is they're not moderated as well. And so you could be guilty by association showing up next to a really low quality result press release. Now, the other issue is, so when you have a paid outlet, it acts as a gating mechanism for quality control, which also helps reduce automated press release submissions from spammy people. And so you want to go to an outlet, like you can just Google, Google News press release websites and things like that. So your first quality control is it has to be paid. But the second one is what I just mentioned. You have to have an outlet that submits to at least Google News. And so even though this website submits to Google News, this first one does not. So see how we talked about A, it has to be paid. So this is paid, but B, this first one does not submit to Google News. So if you go with an outlet like this, you want at least this one that goes to Google News. Now, these other higher premium ones, if you're using this just for SEO to try and position yourself higher, you don't need to pay the higher cost submission options. The only time that I ever pay the higher ones is if it's genuine news. So an example is a couple of weeks ago, well, it was a couple months ago now, my wife and I did a charity where we paid for Christmas for 50 families. And so that was something that was newsworthy. I wanted to get it out there because I needed to find the families that I wanted to help. And so I had to push out that content. So that was worth paying for the higher outlets, which also pushes it out to other places like the Associated Press, Yahoo Finance. So only pay more if it's worth a potential return on your investment of getting out extra special news. Okay, so that's the concept that we're going to walk through today, and that's just the person schema. Now I'm going to start to walk into how do you generate the schema, and I think it was James that had the question is then where do you place it? All right, so we gave this example here of a personal brand at the beginning. Now notice how it says author under my name. I want to start with that as the first type of schema. So the first actionable type of schema. So this is person schema, and then there's author type. Now let me walk you through how I was able to communicate in Google's love language that I'm an author. So I have a book. So I wrote a book called Outrank. I have a website, freeseobook.com. Now on here, I added schema that says, hey Google, I'm an author. I wrote a book. Here's the title of it, and here's where to find it. Here's what it looks like. Now, I'm going to explain how you generate this in a moment, but let me just explain how search engines look at this. If you go to validator.schema.org, this is a test that you can run on any of your websites. Now, as we progress through the presentation, I'm going to actually ask for volunteers, and I'll have Deidre moderate and give me a domain when we get to that point. And then what we can do is look at the difference between the types of schema results that show up in these examples. So on freeseobook.com, if I validate it, here's what it tells Google. So on the left is the code of the website. That's how search engines look at your website, is the code. They don't look at it visually like we do. And so in the code, it told Google that there is a book represented on this page. And this is the name of the book. And this is the person that wrote it. So now when Google comes here, it doesn't go, well, I think this is a book. And I think this guy named Damon wrote it. I told it with definitive clarity that this is a page about a book, what the book title is, what the book description is. I even wrote the ISBN number, and there's more stuff down here off the frame that I cut off, but I told Google everything. So now it no longer has to guess. So here's how you start to take action on that. You can simply Google book schema generator. Now I put book in a different color because as we walk through this, any of these different types, you can Google whatever it is, schema generator. Now today's presentation we're doing on behalf of CapShow. So Deidre runs a company that is a podcasting content extracting software, right? And so we're going to walk through different ways that you can use CapShow for some of these schemas as well. Now there's a part that's dedicated specifically to podcasters. So if any of you are on podcasts, have your own podcasts, we have a whole bunch of custom stuff just for that. So now when you Google book schema generator, I just picked a random website, right? And you're going to find a generating website that has something like this. It has a form where you put in your name, you put in your book. Is this book in English? What type of genre is this? And things like that. Excuse me. And so these are the things that feed to Google to give it this information. Now, when you use a generator like this, it's going to spit out technical stuff like this. I don't want you to get overwhelmed about this. I don't want you to care about this. All you do with this is copy and paste. Now I'm going to walk you through where you copy and paste it. Depending on which platform you're on, this goes into what's called the head of the website. So if any of you have added a Facebook pixel to your website, it goes in the same place. So this screenshot's from ClickFunnels. So if you use ClickFunnels, you can log into, oh, I got ahead of myself. So if you use ClickFunnels, you just go into where you add your header code, and it's in the main menu of ClickFunnels when you edit your landing page. And so you just paste this above or below any other code that you have in the header. Now, if you're on WordPress, I'm just going to give you examples of ClickFunnels and WordPress. Any other platform should have this same option. You just have to search things like add code to head of whatever platform. So if you use WordPress, you can go into the add plugins and just search something like insert header. There's a bazillion plugins where you can insert header. And what you're doing is installing a plugin, copying and pasting this code and inserting it. Now, my favorite on WordPress is a plugin called Schema Pro. Schema Pro will actually combine this with this. So instead of having to Google these generators, Schema Pro is a plugin that will ask you the prompts and fill it in for you. But it does all sorts of other schema, and we're going to talk about these other schemas. So right now we've talked about person, and then we've talked about book, and there's other ones we're going to walk through. Now, one other example, if you're on WordPress, Divi is a really popular theme. It's my favorite theme because you can do countless things with it. If you use Divi, then this is where you can go on Divi. Go to Divi integration, turn on header code, and paste it there. So why don't I take a pause for a moment, because that was just a quick dump of what we're doing and a really technical example of how we do it. So do we have any questions so far? Anything I can clarify, Deidre?
Nothing, no questions so far, but I did want to look back with Mike. Who asked, where does it get placed on the webpage? So Mike, I just want you to confirm whether Damon answered your question. And while we are taking this break, Damon mentioned at the beginning that we did a pre-recording of a challenge. It's a 5-day challenge. And a lot of the stuff that he kind of because this stuff can be overwhelming. So the challenge is going to be happening in a week and a half's time. We'll leave the link in the comments as well, so you can sign up for that. It's free. But Damon is he's stepped out in a lot more detail, some of the stuff that he kind of skimmed through today. So that's a really, really great chance for you to get back in and actually, go step by step with Damon. So yeah, Mike says, yes, that makes sense with it being in the header. Thanks for info on that. Awesome. Okay. Any other questions? Just keep them coming, please. Just comment all your questions and I will periodically interrupt Damon to get him to answer them. But so Jane, so if you have WordPress, the Schema Pro plugin is the way to go. Are there tutorials for it?
Yeah, so if you use WordPress, I almost exclusively use that plugin, and it is so dummy proof that there are tutorials, but it is literally a wizard, right? You pick the schema type, and then it'll prompt you to fill in the blanks. It's makes it so simple. And so it'll walk you through what to input for the different type of schema you want to generate, and then it'll actually place it on the page for you. So it'll prompt you, and then it'll say, great, we're going to put it on a page. Which page is it that you want it on? So it does everything for you.
Amazing. Okay, so James said loves dummy proof. It did flash up and it's in the comments. So if you want to sign up for that challenge with Damon, that's where you can do it. But no more questions right now. Let's keep going.
Okay, cool. So now Deidre mentioned the challenge that's coming up, and so the stuff that I'm getting into today, while I'm trying to keep it simple, if you're not familiar, if this is already a little bit more than you're familiar with, like Deidre said, that other challenge will be the gap that brings you up to speed to understand this. So if you can at the least take notes and go, okay, I just need to Google this and paste it here, then the rest will make sense if you want to jump onto that other challenge. All right, so let's share the screen again. Okay, so now let's get into another example of a different type of schema. So now we're going to do business schema. So this can show up in different ways. So here's just one example of mine. So we get this big monopoly where we get the maps result. We get these sublinks, which are called site links. We get your little panel to show up here. And so this is through business schema. Now it's the same concept. And so there's different schema types. So here's where I want to ask for a volunteer. So what we can do is, does anybody have a business related website that they want us to compare the before and after? Because I'm going to show you what business schema looks like to generate this. And so what would be great is if somebody would be humble enough for me to point out the gaps where it's missing, and so I can illustrate how you get it added. So does anybody want to paste their link into the comments, and maybe Deidre can tell me what it is?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is like like you don't understand how generous this offer is, because Damon knows his stuff and he is not cheap, by the way. So this is the way
Well,
to
that is
get
true. I
in.
don't know. That could have been interpreted a few different ways.
Okay, so Blake did have a question while we wait for Damon, not to get ahead of myself or you. We're talking person schema and it's making a lot of sense. Do you do a variety schema for your customers, or is the strategy drilling down on one or two?
Yeah, great question. And if we don't have any volunteers, I don't need volunteers. I can still illustrate this. This is just like, to your point, an opportunity to highlight somebody's specific website. So, Blake, great question. So what we do is when we have a new client, we go through and basically identify the different types of schema that is available based on their industry. So why don't I actually bring this back up and go back to a frame here? So what we do is there's like infinite types of schema. But these are the core ones that we've identified that consistently drive value, and then also are pretty repeatable, right? Most websites have one or multiples of these. So there's no such thing as too much schema as long as it's applicable. So we actually try to add all of these if applicable.
Amazing. Okay, so James has said he's got a podcast website. So maybe because you want a business, right? So maybe we can come back to
Yeah.
podcast potentially.
We'll
Craig.
do a
Oh,
podcast example
okay.
later. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that later. Okay, cool. So Craig was first up. So he said, not sure if it's what you're looking for, but would love the input. So Craig, can you let us know, please, what your business is? How many volunteers are you looking for, Damon?
Just one for each time I ask for the different type.
Okay, cool. Juliet, your business work, the link didn't come up, so I can't see it. You just said this is my Juliet. Can you just tell us? I don't know whether people are allowed to put links, maybe, or I can't see them in the comments. So maybe
I'll just go through and everybody that wants to check their website, I'll show you how to check your own website. And then if we get the opportunity for the other types like the podcast schema and I ask for volunteers, we can do that then. But I have examples of everything, so we don't need them. I just wanted to give an opportunity to showcase.
Craig came back. It's a DJ and photo booth company. Is that?
If he mentioned his is primarily for podcasts, then we'll just hit that on the podcast one. Or was okay.
This is
do you have the URL? Okay.
Yeah.
What's
URL.
the link?
Can you put, Craig? Can you put the link in the comment, please, or at least the business name so that we can Google it? If for some reason StreamYard's not letting me see
maybe
links.
maybe it's filtering it for spam or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I'll just show how everybody can do this on their own. So, and I'll still be able to highlight the difference of if we had a live example or not. So go to validator.schema.org. Let me switch my screen so I can type that specific URL in here. So we'll go share screen, switch tabs. All right, here we go. So if you go to, all right, can you guys see this? Does it show up here? Validator.schema.org.
Yep. And Craig did just mention if you wanted to do it on based on it's Pittsburgh event group.
Does that look right?
Event. Yep.
Let's see. This one? Okay.
Yep.
All right. So what we want to do is anybody that's watching can do this with their own website. Just go to validator.schema.org and then paste in your URL. Now, what this is doing is, like we said earlier, this is the code of the website. And on the right is what Google says, hey, this is what I've been told is on here. So right now it's only said there's an article. And so this doesn't even talk about, what we should have in here is your business name. And then we should be able to communicate to search engines, here's your phone number and what is your social media links and all these other things, right? And so right now we're missing the opportunity to tell Google that this is a business and what type of business it is, like what type of industry, what your phone number is, email, website, if you have a physical address, all these things. And so the more that we can communicate in that love language to Google, then the more it's going to trust it to show you up higher for the types of services that you offer. So what I want to illustrate here is, depending on when you run your test, a lot of people will probably see this because article is a schema type which we'll cover, but it's like a default type. And so depending on the platform, this is probably, I'm guessing, on WordPress. Yeah, so this is built on WordPress, right? So by default, WordPress is a blogging platform. So it's just going to add article schema to the majority of the pages. And so other platforms, it'll probably have article or it'll be blank. So now let me switch tabs here and I'll show you an example of what we want it to look like. So what we want it to look like is this. So I'll show you how we broke this down. This is on my company's page. And so notice the difference. So what Google is able to read in here is it's a local business and it's a contact page. And so then when I click on either of these, when you validate your own, it'll expand. And so when it expands, this is the information that I fed to Google in its love language. So I said, this is a local business. Here's the company name, phone number, URL. Now, price range is based on $1 sign, $2 signs, or $3. So it's like cheap, medium, expensive, right? And so that doesn't really have a huge influence on how you show up, but it could show up in different it used to show different, where you have like your reviews that show underneath your results on organic. It used to have a little price range there, and sometimes it shows things, sometimes it doesn't. So some of these won't make a huge difference, but these are the types of things that these schema generators will create and then communicate to search engines. So we told it what our logo is, we told it our mailing address, and then we start to communicate reviews here. So we'll talk about reviews later as well, but basically anything that you see that shows up in a search result that's not just words, anytime you have a bigger real estate from images, anytime you have a bigger real estate because it shows review count or product images or thumbnails, most of that comes from things like schema, because Google trusts it better because you took the time to communicate specific things to it. Now, if we go back here and then we click on contact page, it expands there and then it says the same type of thing. Here's how you contact us. And then it'll also feed different, depending on your platform, it'll also communicate when this page was last updated or published. Now, Google does take into consideration the length of time that a URL has been around. It's not like a deal breaker, but the theory is the longer your website's been established, the less potential it is that it's shady and fly by night, right? And so this is why your different platforms, I also use WordPress, feeds these dates and timestamps to search engines. So you can see the difference in here that we can use this validator.schema.org for every different type of schema type that we're going to go through today. And what you should see is, depending on which type of schema is valuable to you, whether it's a local business, a product, a service, a podcast, a person, you should see that show up here, because without it, you're not telling Google that that's what you offer. Okay, so let's get into another example, product schema, right? Because most of us either have a service or a product as part of our business. So I just talked about business. Now we can break that down into a product or service. So I'm going to give an example of Rockwell. So Rockwell is a client of ours. Now, we talked about just a moment ago about how anytime we have anything else that's not just the text where we have reviews and prices. Look, we told Google that there's a return policy. And not only did we tell Google the price of this watch, but we told it that it's in stock. So Google's probably going to show your products that are in stock more than products that are out of stock, or Google's not sure if they're in stock. So when you communicate these things, again, Google then feels more confident to show those results. So let's walk through how this one's built out as a product schema. So Rockwell runs on Shopify. And so I'm going to skip the volunteers on some of these now that we kind of understand the process of just going to validator.schema.org. But the reason why we don't need volunteers needed on the product is because most shopping platforms automatically add this specific type of schema. So if you're on WooCommerce or Shopify, it'll automatically add this schema. So here's the example of Rockwell's that generated this. And so if we validate it on that validator.schema.org, look, doesn't this match what we see over here? The product pricing and name, all the same, right? And so now you can start to visualize when you put this stuff on your website, how it communicates to Google, and then Google goes, oh, okay, I know what to do with this. Now, let's get into service schema. Okay, so we have businesses that either sell a thing or do a thing. So we're going to give an example. So Bighorn Roofing is a client of ours. There was somebody else, I remember when we were sharing the links and posting about this, that said they were in construction or roofing. So here's a great example, right? So depending on what business you're in, you probably have a services tab, and then below it, it says, here's all the cool things that we do. Now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to validate it. And look, we told Google that these are the services that we offer. And this is the description of it. Now, without that, at the very beginning, I talked about Google just makes educated guesses. And so if we don't clearly communicate to Google that this is a roofing company and these are the specific types of services. So in this example, they offer new construction and roof repair. But what if it was only one or the other? What if we only did repair but not new construction? Well, then if we don't communicate that with clarity to Google, then it's not confident if somebody types in roof repair company near me, does Bighorn do repair or do they only do new construction? And so when you communicate that through these schema types, this will help Google understand very specifically when to show you as the best result. Are we good so far? Any questions?
Oh, so good. I mean, you've got some wows rolling in. This is amazing, breaking it down excellently. Blake was saying, yikes, I have no schema on my website. My business has been around for years. I think a lot of us, like, let us know in the comments, like, are you in that boat as well? Because
let's all rate ourselves and have a pity party. 1 to 10. How good is your schema so far?
Yeah, I think there are going to be a lot of ones, ourselves included. So thank you for dropping all of this knowledge, Damon. Let's keep going. No other questions, but everyone, please keep asking your questions as we go through.
Okay, so what I tried to do as I built out this presentation is make everything be able to roll into the next thing. So we went business, and then we broke down the business types, product and service. And so now when you have a product or service, usually you have FAQs, right? So when we have FAQs, or we should have FAQs, why? Because we want to communicate to Google why we're the best, so then Google can show us in front of our clients. Now, Eco Green is a client of ours. They sell these really interesting multi-million-dollar tire shredding machines. That's not a very common industry. And so the ideal buyers for these machines are governments and municipalities and cities and things like that. And so they buy these giant machines to shred the tires for the waste to repurpose it. And this is where we get like the rubber for playgrounds and things like that. So this is a very interesting industry. So we should probably communicate to Google why we're the best and what it is. So usually, there's 2 examples of FAQs that come to mind. One is you're in a competitive industry that there's a million other people that offer it. So you should have FAQs to separate yourself and distinguish yourself. And so you should communicate why you're the authority. Now, the other example is like Eco Green. Like, this is not a common industry, so we need to help Google understand it. So you probably have some sort of FAQ page. It'll probably look like this, toggles. Doesn't matter if it has toggles or not, but usually you have the title of the question and then the answer below it. So in this example, it's a toggle. You click on it and it expands. Now, earlier we talked about how search engines look at websites based on code, not visual like you and I do. So when we validate this, look, we told Google, this is a question, and this is an answer, and this is a question, and this is an answer. So now when Google goes to your website on your FAQ page, I bet you the majority of the people that have FAQs have no FAQ schema because it's not a default schema type. Like you have to go out of your way and tell search engines, tell your platform to tell search engines that this isn't just random text. This is an FAQ. Now, what's cool about this is let's look at this. Is there a need for more tire processing capacity within my specific area? Now, everybody that's watching this, think of an FAQ that you get a lot, or think of an FAQ that if you were to show up as the answer on Google, that you could monetize. Now look what happens. This is called position zero. So position zero is when you get this big real estate from an answer. And look who's got this giant position zero FAQ, Eco Green, because we took the time to communicate to search engines that this is a question and we have the answer. Now, you've probably seen this in other things, this position zero concept. You'll see this like in recipes and other big blown out things. So yes, there's also a recipe. No, I'm not going to go over it. And so the idea though, is there's all these cool ways that you can show up in what's called position zero. Now they call it position zero because it's before position one, right? It's before the standard position one. All right. Now we're going to talk about content schema because we're transitioning now from FAQs, which is a piece of content, into the different types of content. Now here's where we can start to take advantage of Capsho, which is Deidre's platform. So if you use a podcast or you have different types of content, now why don't I pause for just a moment and I'll have Deidre explain her product and then I'll walk you through how you leverage it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Damon. So basically, for anyone who's not a Capshovian, what Capsho does is you upload any kind of conversation. So audio, think audio or video. So it could be a podcast episode, it could be a YouTube video, it could literally just be a voice recording that you do on your phone, speaking out your thoughts. And then so Capsho takes that content and it then creates even more content marketing assets. So we're talking social media posts, we're talking emails, LinkedIn articles, and blog posts, specifically how-to blog posts, listicle style blog posts, and like Q&A. So that's kind of what Capsho does. And what is really cool about, and you'll see this in the challenge as well, when Damon talks about the importance of almost like not using AI, but the way that we do it is the reason why not to use AI is because AI can't anchor in your stories and your experiences and the things that make you different and make you, the things that connect with your audience. But the really cool thing about what Capsho does is because it's based on your anchor content, it actually creates the content on you, which is really cool. So, when we talk about stories, it actually pulls out those stories, and that's the basis of the blog post that it writes, things like that. So, thanks for letting me brag a little bit on Capsho. And yeah, one of the things that it does is it creates schema for your blog post as well.
So what's cool about what Deidre just said, or what I want to emphasize, is she said even if it's just an audio recording. And so when we talk about content, a lot of us get stuck either because we don't know what to write about or we overthink how to write it. And to Deidre's point, the unique value proposition is you. Like that's the difference between you and AI. And so even at a large scale where I run an enterprise agency and we do content for billion-dollar brands, we don't use AI. And I'm not going to say like, there's not opportunities to use AI. There certainly is. But what I want to emphasize is if you use AI, and like an example of a good opportunity is like Deidre's tool, being able to extract your story. Like the emphasis is your story. What makes you different, right? And so then what you can do is, to Deidre's point, is don't overthink this. Like if you're on podcasts or if you do webinars and things like Deidre and I are doing, you can extract the content from that. But if you don't, or if you're new to producing content, just ramble, because you're not going to publish the video. You're not going to publish the selfie video. You're not going to publish the audio recording. What you're going to do is then just upload it to Capsho and let Capsho work its magic, right? So let me show you through, let me jump back on and I'll show you how to use that. So
Sorry, Oh, sorry, Damon, just really
Yeah.
quickly. We've got a couple of questions. Should we
Oh,
take,
sure. Yeah.
okay, so sorry, let's start with Mike's. If you have an FAQ section on your services page, can you list the page for two categories like you did with the local business and contact as you showed earlier, or only work on a separate FAQ page?
Great question. So you can do either or. So like you can have a dedicated FAQ page and just put them all on there. But I can actually give you an example of how to break it up on separate pages. So let me load this guy right here, and then I'll share my screen. All right, so let's share this other screen here.
How good are you at multitasking, Damon? Can I sneak in another question while you're doing that?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool. So Blake's question, I've seen businesses use local content like top 10 restaurants in your town when they're a roofing company. I assume they're doing this to try and rank up local SEO rankings, but is this actually doing worse for you since Google sees it as unrelated for your service, or is it neutral?
Correct, yeah. So I would not. So they're just playing the content quantity game, not quality. And so just like we talked about sharing your own unique story, right? They're probably just blabbering, and they're probably just doing content at scale instead of content at quality. And so you're right, because we talk about how you can only show up on Google for what Google can read. And the main, if you simplify everything we've been talking about, it's about exact relevance, right? And so in that example, they're diluting the focus of what their services are. So now Google's less likely to show them as an authority in that. And kind of related, I'll give you an example of somebody we did some consulting for, and they came in and they said, so this was a real estate company, and they said, well, our SEO company that we were working with before gave us this big list of things that were on page 1 for, but like one of them was how to clean bed bugs from your website, or from your house, right? And so okay, it's house related, but how in the world is talking about bed bugs going to attract a pre-qualified buyer to purchase a house, right? And so not only did you dilute the value of your website, but you're confusing search engines, and you're doing the opposite of attracting pre-qualified buyers. So
So good. Okay, I think that definitely answered the question. So let's go back to Mike's then on the two separate.
okay, so let's so what Mike's question is let's see. Okay, so can you see where it says Tingy? Are you seeing that on screen? Tingy Injury Law Firm.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so here's an example of a client. So this is a big injury law firm in Las Vegas. Here's their different service types, right? And so on it, we have the service schema for each of them. Notice how we do not have a dedicated FAQ page. And so this is different than Eco Green. Eco Green, we have a dedicated FAQ page. Now, if I grab any one of these service pages, and if I scroll down here on this example, FAQs, right? And so if I validate this page, look, we told Google on this page, this is a service, and here are FAQs specific to this service. So yeah, you can do FAQs dedicated to independent pages.
Amazing. Okay, great.
All right, so let me switch back to the other frame here.
And Mike, that I'm assuming that answered your question. Perfect. Yeah, he says, thanks so much.
Okay. So in the example of using CapShow, when we're starting to talk about creating content, so you either upload your podcast audio, you upload your video, you upload your ramble, and then you can hit get schema markup. And in this example, it's going to output blog content. And so we talked about how you paste this into the head, and this is the code that it outputs. So what we can do is, once we've written that content, we can also amplify it into different pieces of content. And this is something that I went even deeper on the challenge. So if you get the chance to join the challenge, I go through like how to identify content pieces that attract pre-qualified buyers, just like we were talking about. Like, instead of just making up content for the sake of making up content, there are tools out there that'll tell you what people are already asking in your industry and the pain points that your customers have. And so then you can use that to bridge the gap between the product and service that you offer to be the solution for those pain points or questions that people are already asking search engines. So after we create this content piece, usually you go text first. And so I want to give just a brief example of how you can amplify it. Maybe you can repurpose it into a graphic. Maybe you can repurpose it into a video. And so we're going to talk about different types of content schema like videos. Now, the reason why we want to repurpose this and amplifies it is because then Google goes, well, these guys are way more of an authority because they talk about lots of things in lots of ways. So let's show them organically higher. And then, hey, cool, they have these other things. So that increases your possibilities of also showing up in the video carousel or the image carousel. Now look how much real estate I own. So now I get way more visibility, way more credibility, more click-throughs, and I also suppressed the competition. So that's why you want to repurpose your content. Now, we talked about taking audio and using CapShow. And then at the beginning, I think it was James that says, I have a podcast website and I wanted to go specifically in a podcast. So I'm going to end the presentation going really deep on podcast schema. So what you can do is if you have a podcast, you probably have a website that looks something like this and you have your guests. Now, the first thing that I would recommend from an SEO perspective is give each of your episodes a dedicated page. A lot of times I see people that have a podcast and it has the homepage and then it has the about me and then it has episodes. And every single episode is just right there, the players for all of them. So you can only go to one page to play 50 different podcast episodes. Well, if you got all your episodes on one page, then that means you do not have independent episodes on independent pages. Therefore, you cannot communicate to Google the differences between the episodes. So you need to have your episodes on separate pages. Now, depending on the platform and the player you use, you might have to play around to figure that out. But like I use Libsyn. Libsyn's a pretty popular platform, and it allows you to embed the independent episodes on independent pages. And so on your independent pages, it'll probably look something like this. You know, you got your player here, whether or not you have a featured image, doesn't matter. But then sometimes we have text and then we put the episode highlights and whatever. Now, if you're one step ahead of most people, then you also probably have transcripts. Now, I don't overthink the transcripts. And so I just put this little automated disclaimer that says transcripts were generated automatically and may contain inaccuracies and errors. I don't want to spend the time editing out ums and ahs, right? It's not going to make that big of a difference. And so I want to spend my time where it matters. So the first step in extracting the value in your podcast is written word. Google can only rank you for what it can read. Now, it can make assumptions and it's getting better at interpreting video and audio. Why would you not just drop it in CapShow and pull the text out? So once we pull the text out, that's the first step in amplifying the value of your podcast episode is pasting the text in readable format on your page. Now, what did we talk about? Validating it, right? So go to validator.schema.org. This is where everybody's going to have the pity party on their podcast, is because you're not going to see this. This is what you should see. These are 4 different types of schema that I can do for just a podcast. So we've talked about, to Blake's question earlier is like, which ones do I do? As long as it's applicable, do them all. So in a podcast, so article 1 is a default, but it's because we have the written word. But we want to go a step further and tell Google, it's not just an article, it's a podcast episode. And there's a certain person that's a guest. And that text is not just a text, it's a transcript. And so I'm going to walk you through each of these on expanded slides. So if we look at the article, then it goes, hey, here's the URL, here's the title, here's the date published, here's the featured image. Now, if we expand the podcast episode, look how cool this is. Here's the URL, here's the title of the episode, here's the date it was published. Now Google knows this is a podcast episode. And then that text, right? Here's the second value. When we paste the text from the transcript, we want to tell Google it's a transcript. And so there's a transcript schema type. So now Google better understands that this is a conversation. Now, here's my favorite part about podcast schema is earlier we talked about person schema to accomplish this. you can put person schema on your guests. So now you can potentially leverage the credibility and the value of your guests. And when people search their name, your website shows up, or vice versa. If you're on somebody else's podcast, that podcast could show up, right? And so this was a podcast, this was a YouTube recording that I did for another group, and it shows up here. So there's all sorts of really cool opportunities to use schema specifically for podcasts. So I'm going to wrap up now, give a recap in just 3 or 4 frames. Your goal is to show up higher on search engines, whether it's for yourself as a personal brand, for a business, for a podcast, or content types, FAQs. You can only show up for what Google can read. So if you're focusing on a personal brand, you need to get content out there. A really easy outlet is, here's a referral link to a distribution website. Don't do this one. You can also Google other ones. You can just Google press release websites. Don't submit to any that are free. That's a quality control thing, so you don't show up by other low quality automated press releases from spamming people. But even if it does have a price, like in this case, read the details between the price differences. Like in this one, you'll skip this one because even though it has a price point, which is the first filter, the second filter is it should at least distribute to Google News. This $29 offer does not distribute to Google News. Now, you also don't need to do these other pricey ones unless it's actual news, right? If you're using this just for an SEO play, then just go with the cheapest one that gets you featured on Google News. But if you have something really cool that's brag worthy, then sure, go for the higher price point ones. Now, you can do different types of schema. So if we condense the entire presentation, it's based on push content out, add schema. These are the different types of schema you can add. You can do it for personal branding, your business. Depending on your business, you can add product or service schema. You can also add FAQs about your product or service. And then you want to do different types of content. You can use tools like Capsho to do that. And I have nothing to sell you, but I would greatly appreciate feedback if I can answer anything in future versions of this presentation better, or if you could just leave me a review as a thank you. That's all I ask. And then we will take some Q&As.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. I did this in the challenge when we recorded it, but I gave you standing ovation. So I feel like that's dumb and I can't do that again. But I'd like everyone else behind their comments to just stand up and give Damon a standing ovation. That was amazing. Okay, there are some questions. And by the way, like, I just want to underscore when Damon says he just wants to give, like, he actually Damon spoke about almost a month ago now at Capshovian's Live. It was our first live event, and you literally blew everyone's minds. And what people got from you was like schema, because as you said, this is Google's love language. And so Damon actually, after the event, reached out to me and he was like, you know what, I really want to do a deep dive with your community on this particular topic, because there's just so much more that I know that I can give. And so Damon, I want to thank you seriously for just being the amazing human that you are, and sharing all of that with us.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Okay. All right. So let's get into some okay. So the WordPress plugin. So Blake was asking about so that was, remind us again, the schema plugin that you use?
Schema Pro.
Schema
so you just
Pro.
search WordPress Schema Pro.
Awesome. Okay. So James is saying, so should I do a person schema for solo shows and a guest?
So what I would do on on your podcast website, if you have a solo episode where it's just you, then you don't need to add yourself over and over and over and over. So what you could do is just on your About Me page, add the James Early person schema. And then as you have guests on those particular episodes, then add the schema for that individual.
Awesome. Yeah. Great. Now, how do I do schema when I'm a guest on someone else's show?
You beg and you ask nicely, because you don't own their website. So what you could do is what I would do is I would create, like, you don't want to have to retype the same thing over and over. And so I would make just like a Loom video that you can send podcasts and go, hey, look, and what you want to do is make sure you communicate the value in it for them. Because if you're like, hey, do this for me, then they're going to be like, I'm not going to spend the time to do that. But if you're like, hey, there's this thing called schema, and what it does is it better helps the search engines understand your guests. So not only could you leverage your guest credibility, you could also show up for when other people search your guest names, right? And so if you can communicate the value in it for them, then it's genuinely a win-win. But if you position it just for yourself, then they're going to not understand and not going to care.
Amazing. I think that was super clear. Mike, when you do an episode schema for the name field, should it be just the guest or both mine and the guest?
So the way that you want to look at it is because you got other things to consider besides just SEO, and it's the readability of the episode title. So there is value in whatever is readable. So I default, the way that I generally do it is guest name and then topic, because then that makes sense to the user and I get the value from an SEO perspective. So like if you think about, if you put the podcast number in the title, that doesn't help SEO and it's probably actually confusing, but it might be valuable for your listeners because then they see the chronological order. So you kind of have to give it a take and think about what matters most to you.
Amazing. I do want to, Emily's just said she's excited for the challenge. So I do want to remind everyone again, as Damon mentioned, schema is somewhat, it's not, I would say you break it down so easily that now it doesn't seem like an advanced topic. It just seems like, yeah, we can all do this. But there may be a little bit of a gap around, the content side of it, the structure of your website, things like that. And Damon actually goes deep into those in the challenge. So sign up, it's free. So you may as well come along and do it with us. That's going to be super exciting. Your book, Damon, tell us again about your book.
So wrote a book about SEO, and it walks through, it's an A to Z blueprint. And so whether you're a complete novice with SEO or advanced, there's something in it for you. So, what's funny is the first sentence in the book says, let's be honest, a book about SEO doesn't sound like the sexiest topic. So what I had to do when I wrote, so the reason why I wrote the book is because, like Deidre said, I genuinely like to help people. It's personally rewarding. And so I got kind of sick of all the garbage and inaccuracies about SEO that was out there. And so I wanted to create a resource that I could go, no, that's not true. Or here's the proper way to do it, and then point people to it. And so, that's why I give away the book for free in PDF format at the website, freeseobook.com. But then we also have it available in print on Amazon, or we have it on Audible as well if you're an audio listener.
Amazing. Okay, cool. So we have a couple of, the questions keep coming in. Do you have a couple more minutes, Damon? Are you good?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, great.
I padded it.
Okay, cool. So Mike was asking, any suggestions on how to integrate the information from your book with this training and upcoming masterclass? Well, okay, yeah.
So the book will, it just like I did this presentation where it was transitioned smoothly from one thing to the next, that's how I built the book. So the book starts, like a great example is where I talked about the two different audiences. One, somebody that knows nothing, and then somebody that knows a lot, right? And so how do I hold the attention of both of those? And so where I started it was with telling stories. And they're interesting stories about how I outranked a $1 billion company, about how I first found my success and how I started to monetize things. And so it's like, exciting things that show you the potential of SEO while very gently educating you on it. And so that way, if you don't know anything, you'll transition into it. But if you already know something, the stories hold your attention. And then by the time you get halfway through the book, you're educated enough on the processes, or you've enjoyed the success examples, and then it starts to go into the very technical things.
Awesome. And Emmy was asking, does your book also cover schema?
It does not, no. So it's more along the lines of the challenge. So what the book covers is the potential in SEO, right? Examples of wins, and then those three core fundamentals of site structure, content, and credibility.
Awesome. And James has just said he's just ordered the book. So you go.
Awesome.
Amazing. All right. I'm gonna let you go. I'm mindful of everyone's time. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the first, I think I mentioned at the very beginning, this is the first Mastermind Live that we've done on this YouTube channel. We're going to be doing the monthly. So if you want to get updated on them, subscribe to this channel, please. We're basically, this is all about winning the content game. So it's all about content creation. It's all about getting your content discovered, growing that audience, and then monetizing it. So I'm going to have different experts like Damon and each month, and I'd be excited for you to come along and nerd out with us on all things content marketing. So thank you once again, Damon. I literally cannot thank you enough from the bottom of my heart. I hope everyone comes along, does a challenge with us, and let's find some success finally with SEO.
Yeah, well, it's been fun. Great questions, everybody. Thanks for jumping on.
Thank you.